What's going on? What's going on, y'all? Thank y'all for those that are catching this either on replay or when we're live. But today I wanted to go over a little bit of our programming protocols, what I do for some of my clients, and simple ways that we can try and build up programs, even if you cannot afford myself or any other trainer at this point in time. Now, programming, as you guys might have saw on my last poll, was actually our top choice for what a lot of people struggle with when it comes to being in the gym. So I want to go over a few things that'll kind of break that down as far as why most people get very confused when it comes to programming. We're going to break this down into different sections. With today, I want to talk about exercise selection within that programming. Over the next few days in the course of this week, I will be breaking down different things and different points just because they are so informative that I want to make sure I break them down in a way that can be easily understood and implemented a lot faster and a lot simpler. So as we go through this, I'm going to try and keep it as basic as I can within my terminology and things like that. If you have any questions, please shoot me an email at the number 1decisionfit@gmail.com. And I will try and make sure I answer your questions as best as I can. Or if you're a follower or friend of mine on any social media, make sure you hit me up on there as well. So when it comes down to, our program, and a quick disclaimer, these are all things that I do after I've already done some type of eval on my client or whoever I may be working with at that time. Now, any program that you make, even if it's for yourself, if you have not ran yourself through some type of evaluation to see where you truly are, then it is a generalized program at best. It is not anything that is truly one-on-one and personalized to you, even though you're writing it. But now that we got that out of the way, one thing that we need to realize is that we should not be training and putting together programs in terms of what the exercise name is, more so what the exercise movement entails. So many times, even when we think about a full body training, for example, right? We have our squat, and we have bench press, we have deadlifts, we have barbell rows, we have dumbbell lunges, and let's say crunches for core. Now, these are all things that, you hear the name and you think automatically, I have to map out every single exact exercise as it is. And oftentimes that's what locks our mind into something to where we feel like, man, I'm so limited on what I'm able to do. Within this template of programming that I really want to give you guys today is something that you'll be able to interchange and know that you can use either at home, in the gym, out at the park, limited equipment, an abundance of equipment, all these different things, because what we have to do is make sure that all these things will be able to be handled so that way we can find consistency in the best way possible. So when we're thinking about these movements such as a squat, it's more so looking at what is the movement pattern that it brings. It brings knee flexion and it brings hip flexion, meaning that muscle is being shortened up to a shorter length than what it typically stands at in a static hold. So with that being thought in mind, along with the other exercises as they have different movement capabilities, those are the things that we really want to try and emulate within the exercises that we choose. So while I may not be able to use a barbell squat, depending on where I am within my phase of training and where I am within my training age, I am able to make sure, hey, even if I only have kettlebells, I can make it work. Even if I only have a 100-pound punching bag, I can make it work. And I can do it off of equipment that may not be to the abundance of a full-on gym, but it allows me to stay consistent because I may not be able to get to the gym today. I may not be able to get to the gym tomorrow. And as we go forward in these days, that's where things like tempo and intensity will come into play. But we're going to dive into those at a later time. Today, I really want to focus on exercise selection. So when we think about that movement system being brought forth, once again, the knee flexion and hip flexion, for you guys that are a little bit more visual, let me push this back a little bit. And so if we're thinking about knee flexion, that is the knee bending. This knee is flexing at the joint. And as we go down, we're hinging, yes, but that hip that's in the front is flexing inward, right? So since those two muscles are shortening up, we are seeing some type of flexion within there. Same way within every exercise that we usually have as a staple, they have a primary movement system. So with a bench press, for example, that is a pushing movement. In most cases, we are going to see some type of tricep extension, along with any type of extension within the frontal delt. In most cases, one thing that is always overlooked is scapular retraction. And this is not in every single exercise, but in the majority of pushing exercises, you want to make sure you have that scapular retraction and isometric hold. Once we start to understand these things, it's like, okay, how can I substitute these things out? I don't have a bench press. I have push-ups. I have dumbbells that can allow me to get a little bit deeper in depth. I'm able to emulate all these muscular movements just by making sure I keep the movement pattern the same. Even in the fact of a press, there are also other ways that we are able to work that movement. If we turn that press into something that's more vertical, that helps us out as well, which as we get later into this video here, we will dive deeper into adding variation within that, because I will give you a brief template on how to construct a simple 3-day full body routine that you'll be able to write out today and go and do over the next course of this week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever. So that way, as we go forward through these other trainings, you'll be able to implement the other things into what you already have written and just fix the finite details of it. So now, as we move past what that pushing movement will be, we look at the pull in the same way. Depending on whether you're working from a horizontal pull or a vertical pull, will strongly dictate which muscles are pulling into that contraction. But that also will let you see, based on those muscles, what exercises can I use based off of what modality that I'm working with, whether it be that I'm trying to work on conditioning, whether I'm trying to work on strength, whether I'm trying to work on hypertrophy. All those things will dictate, okay, what am I going to use for it? What gives me the best possibility of muscular contraction versus other ones giving me the better possibility of muscular strength and muscular tension. So I'm trying not to try and throw out too many big terms and whatnot, but just to really try and keep things in a way that is understood, and you are able to make sure that, hey, I know this, I can make this happen, and I'm going to be able to put this together and find something that I can use right now for myself while I'm still in these stages of infancy within my journey. Even if you start a new phase, you're in a new phase of infancy, so that way I can still see progress, right? So let's as we are moving through all these different movement systems, as you see, there are so many different components that make this up more so than just a singular exercise. We can find so many different ways, which is why nowadays you will see so many creatives on social media that are, doing these newer exercises. I don't want to call them made up, but doing these newer exercises that are a little bit less conventional, but still can work for them. And so those are things that we always want to keep in mind. Yes, if we stick to the traditional exercises and we have the capabilities to do so, then those things will definitely give us a good foundation until we need to progressively move on into other areas of it. Now, let's think about in terms of when we're writing this program, what is the limitations that we have within our equipment? I'm sitting downstairs in my basement in my home gym right now, which obviously is not outfitted to the same capabilities as what a commercial gym would be. But I know how to use the things that I have in terms of bands, in terms of kettlebells, in terms of body weight, and just so that way I can maximize whatever growth that I can make here at my home to where I know I can be consistent, where I know I have a lot less excuses, here than having to drive, whether it be 5 or 30 minutes to the nearest commercial gym to get my workout in. And I have so much time to think about what I'm not going to do and turn around and do something different, or feel like I have time constraints due to my work schedule. So I say all that to say there are so many different ways that we can, should, and need to find consistency within whatever we are doing. So now, if we're thinking about any type of movement that usually will be using two legs or two arms, in those terms we call it bilateral, and possibly we have limited equipment, using unilateral resistance is not a problem. It actually does add in a component of core training along with that, more so on the side of stabilization instead of spinal flexion that a lot of people are used to. Spinal flexion being thinking of a crunch, bringing the spine shorter. If we're standing up and it's elongated, let me use this instead, elongated, and we're bringing it over. That would be some type of spinal flexion. Or either core rotation, all these different things compose the core, but regardless, if we're using something like a crunch, that would be our spinal flexion, but if we're doing something like unilateral work, a single arm bench press, a single leg squat, all these things will start to encompass that trunk and that core to where we need to have that dynamic stabilization within our movement pattern. So those are things to think about if you have to use one piece of equipment versus having a pair of dumbbells or anything else that you may or may not need. So once we move on from there, obviously as we go into sets and rep schemes, these things will be more so detailed in a lot of our later videos and our later trainings, because once again, that's one of those things that we can dive very deep into. But I do want to go over 3 of the major key points that we talked about in today's video. If you go to my Instagram, my TikTok, and my Facebook, you'll see it on all 3 of those reels. And so those 3 topics, we're starting off with number 1 is to make sure that we are focusing on movement patterns. We already kind of touched on that, but always keep that in mind to make sure I'm saying, okay, if I am going to do 3 days a week, even if I'm going to do 2 days a week, to make sure that I'm maximizing and putting myself in the best growth potential, you usually want to hit something at least twice a week. So let's say I'm doing 2 full body days a week because I just don't have the time to get to the gym any more than that. That's perfectly fine. Let's make sure that we are going over our major movement systems. So instead of thinking just the barbell squat, think of the squat pattern, think of the pressing pattern, think of the pull pattern, the lunge pattern, the hinge pattern, and the core pattern. So as long as we are thinking about these patterns of movement, and yes, each one may have different variables within it, then we can better find out how we are going to construct this program. So when we think in terms of, like, let's say if we were to set up this program right now, and as I just said, we have so many different variations of it, even within a squat pattern, going from a bilateral or a unilateral, once again, that double leg or a single leg type of exercise, there are so many variations that we can do. We can do a single leg Bulgarian squat. We can do a skater squat. We can do, ATG squats. We can do box squats. All these things are squat patterns, but as you see, when we open up our mind a little bit more, we have so many different variables that we can add in to say, I never have a reason to skip out on doing that because I can always find something else to do in place of it, which goes a little bit deeper into our subbing exercises, which once again, we're going to have a full training to encompass that as well. When it comes down to setting these exercises up though, you always want to have variation to where we're working it differently. So once again, if we go to that 2-day-a-week type of program, which a lot of you more than likely will start out on just to make sure you can apply the right amount of intensity and have the right amount of rest if you're just getting into exercising. So let's say on the first day, I may do some type of bilateral squat. My second day working out will be more than likely a unilateral type of squat. This way, I am able to work some of the weaker components of stabilization that I may have or may have been found within our eval phase. Same within our pressing variation. Once again, we have horizontal pressing and we have vertical pressing. So if we think of like that horizontal pressing as more of being on a cable machine and doing like a chest press versus, let's say, if we do an overhead shoulder press, then we're going vertical. So we want to think of it in terms of that way to say, okay, that's how I can add variation while still getting a lot of those push muscles that are encompassed within my tricep push pattern, my shoulder push pattern, all those different things to make sure I'm hitting those areas. When we think about some type of pull, we can think about a seated row is one way to hit it horizontally, while a lat pull down or a pull up is a great way to hit it vertically and still work a lot of those pull muscles within that pull pattern. When we think about lunges, we have so many different variations that these are honestly often the most forgotten because everything is thought of as the forward lunge or the reverse lunge. So when we really start to open up and realize we have so many different things, we have a rotational lunge, we have a Cossack lunge or Crossack lunge, I'm sorry, which is basically a lateral lunge that we go a little bit deeper. And you also have a lateral lunge that is a little bit more of a shallow depth that we would drop down to, but it's great in those earlier stages of trying to build up that mobility. So as I'm saying all these things, these are exercises that you can write down and put it on the side and say, okay, if I did this on Monday, then on day 2, which I might do as a Friday, I can go ahead and make sure that I put this other exercise in there to make sure I have variation within my training. And also, so now we've gone over the squat, the push, the pull, the lunge, and now we have our hinge exercises. These are where a lot of people, you can have a lot of fun with these because you can really switch it up. The same way that I may do some type of hinge by doing a Romanian deadlift, which will target the glutes a little bit more, I can also do some type of good morning, which will target the hamstrings a little bit more. I can also do like a hip thrust because there's still a hip hinge within there in a sense, within that pattern before we go to any type of hip extension, right? So all within that hip hinge position, if I'm to stand up and show you, it will be basically, instead of just like bending at the back, I'm pushing my hips back. Think about if the drawer is behind us and we're pushing it closed with that butt. That would be in terms of what a hip hinge is. So now, once we have knocked out a lot of those strength exercises, we kind of know like what is the bread and butter of our main compound lifts. Now, as we go into the core or the trunk training, this is where we have really like so much variation because a lot of people do not recognize what all encompasses the trunk. So obviously, we always think about the abs, but we also have the obliques. We also have the serratus anterior, which is almost like that. I call it like the fish wheels in a sense. If you look at a boxer, when they're fully extended on the punch and you see those muscles, those striations right there, that would be that serratus anterior. But the other side of it that people miss out on is the low back. That is often very much forgotten, especially the erector spinae. So if you do anything like the back extension machine, you are still working the core. That is still a key component of it. It's just now understanding what days to implement those things differently. Because if I just did deadlift that day, do I really need to do any type of back extension? Absolutely not, because you have that included in there. But I don't want to confuse you too much or trying to add too much into it because based off my knowledge, I know a lot of you guys that follow me are beginners in writing their own program, right? So just to keep it simple, yes, you can add those in. I do not recommend it on a deadlift day. I'll go ahead and just throw that out there. But now, as we go into our core training, like I said, there's so many different things that the core does. It does the spinal flexion, which is taking the spine from here to here. It does anti-extension, which if you look at something that's like a medicine ball squat medicine ball crunch, to where we're always keeping that core contracted and keeping some type of bend within the spine, is fighting to make sure that we are working our core all the way through a slow relaxation into an extension, but without letting the spine extend all the way. We also have our rotational core, we have our static holds. And so all these things are different ways to hit the core, which the more days that you add into your training program, the more you can kind of add in on that volume side up there. And also depends on the phase of training that you're in as well, which once again, that'll be a completely other video that we're really going to dive into. So now we did over 2 days, right? Now, as you add in more days, let's say a 3-day split to where we're doing full body, which for most people that do full body, that is usually a standard. They try to hit 3 days out of the week, usually a Monday, Wednesday, Friday with a day in between. That may be either cardio days or active rest, depending on, once again, your phase of training. So you can really switch it up. Oftentimes when it comes to my clients that are focused on just general strength, really just trying to get better all around, and they're not somebody who's a competition lifter. They're not a football player that we know their direct weakness of their last season may have been lower body strength or anything like that. We mix up each day what our primary lift will be. Usually with the end of the week, that Friday being the one that they came into this phase being the strongest at. So I use myself, for example. I am a very strong squatter. My bench press has always been something, or my pressing movement has always been something that I've struggled with a little bit more due to previous shoulder injuries. So therefore, at the start of the week, I will usually prioritize when I'm fresh coming off the weekend, the exercises I need to apply the most strength into, right? So that will entail starting off with a bench, with some type of press pattern, I'll say. It may be incline press, it may be barbell bench press or dumbbell bench press, or it may be an overhead press, depending on where that true weak point was within that last eval. That's the one I'm going to start off with. And then I may move into something that is like a squat, either by way of a superset or by way of which a superset is putting 2 exercises together and then going into a rest period to repeat that after. Or if you do it linearly to where, okay, I'm only going to do 1 exercise, take my rest period, do another exercise, go through all those sets. And then after I'm done with all those sets that are prescribed for that workout, then I'm going to go on to the next exercise. So that would be a linear type of ideology of going about it. But nonetheless, once you have done that, and you have decided how you're going to go about those first 2, you always want to put your main compound lifts first, which is another key that we had talked about. So oftentimes we have other exercises that will target muscle groups a little bit more with a little bit more specificity than some of our larger compound lifts. Once again, our squat, our press, our bench press, our deadlift, those type of things will bring in a lot of muscular contractions all at once. When we look at something that's more so like a leg extension or leg curl, or even with a lunge or a hip hinge, these things kind of narrow it down to certain specific areas a little bit more. So we let those things be the ones that we trickle down to the end as more so accessory work to our major compound lifts. Now, once we have organized that for day 1, now day 2, I'm going to go into something that may be more so, okay, it'll hit, almost, I don't want to say full body in 1 exercise, but it will encompass more exercises. But it was still on the weaker side of things as far as my eval for my whatever it may be, stability, mobility, things like that. And so let's say we're going to move into some type of hinge movement, which in this case, I may program the deadlift, maybe a sumo deadlift or a conventional deadlift, because it's going to hit that hinge pattern for me. So now as I'm doing this, now I'm going to follow that up with what is my next week is that I can apply more energy to at the beginning of this workout, which will more likely be my some type of press. Now, let's say if I did overhead barbell press on day 1 because my shoulders were a weak pushing point, then let's say day 2, I'm going to move it more into a little bit more on a diagonal plane, and I'm going to be doing more of an incline press. And so that will be my secondary exercise. And I will dictate whether I want to make that a linear progression or a superset throughout that workout. And I will let my last compound lift once again be some type of variation squat. If day 1 I did barbell back squat, then day 2 I might do some type of like exertion squat maybe, or maybe I may do front squats. or maybe I'll do hex bar squats. So many different options to be able to add in, but this is just to give you some type of variation. And let's say if I did a forward lunge or a walking lunge for day one, now I'm going to go into lateral lunges for day one. Then I'm going to go into lateral lunges for day two. That way, it allows me to be able to, yes, use that same movement pattern, but I'm able to change what muscles are being targeted in that sense, and therefore, be able to use it differently. Now, if I started off with a hinge pattern, I don't necessarily need to try and bring that in once again in any type of way. So what I would do is more so, okay, I may be able to go and throw in like my pull pattern, for example. I may do some type of lunge variation, superset it with some type of pull-ups or something like that. It's once again, there's so many different options. In day three, you will obviously start off with what it is that you are already strong in. This is a great day to still just make sure, okay, I'm maintaining the things that I was already strong at. I don't want to fall back on those, but I'm able to attack this a little bit more because the other days I put this as a second or third option, to where all my energy wasn't able to be pushed forward towards that for that first exercise of the day, right? I have to prioritize these things because at the end of the day, we have to make sure we preserve ourselves to be able to recover enough to be able to go into that next workout. Even though if on a Friday we have a 2-day rest period, we don't want to get to the point to where Monday I'm still overly sore from what I did Friday, and it's week 3 of my program. Then that tells me that, man, I'm doing a little bit too much. Like I'm probably trying to attack this a little too hard based off the progression I should have took, right? So now the next key that we talked about within that post was also not being specific to swimming. Nowadays, a lot of people will see so much on social media that is, oh, I want bigger arms, I want a bigger chest, I want, for the ladies, the popular thing is I want bigger glutes. And so when we go into the gym after not training ever before or very little before, and we jump straight into specific training of training the glutes primarily, training the chest or the arms and things like that, and that is our primary focus of going into it very specific, we will quickly start to let other things deteriorate. So therefore, we start to create muscular imbalances on a level that is a lot more chaotic than what it should be, just for lack of better words. So as we grow, as we do things, it's expected. We're going to have some type of asymmetry to where my right arm may be a slightly stronger, slightly bigger than my left if I'm a right-handed person. If I am a sport player that primarily does a lot with my legs, kicking, for example, my more dominant leg will be a lot stronger than what that left leg is, not only in terms of strength, but mobility and size as well. So you're going to notice certain things, but it's going to be on a level that more so you will notice because you're in that body. You look at it very closely. Now, a lot of people that go into specific training right away, this is where we start to see a lot of the people that are like, man, like that dude really skips leg day, or that girl, she really does not work her shoulders or her arms at all. But her lower body is great, but she just is nothing up top. And this is where we start to run into those problems because we jump to the specifics right away. And therefore, we have set ourselves in a position of being more imbalanced than anything. So take these keys, try to throw these in with this current training program that we have went over, with the exercises that we have went over, and go from there. Now, if you're seeing this and you feel like, okay, I put this together, I'm not really sure if this is pretty solid, then please go ahead and just put it together, send it to me in a PDF. I would definitely review it for you and let you know, like, hey, I recommend probably changing this or changing that. Mind you, this is going to be something that, from my standpoint, is a lot more general, only because I am not going to be able to, I'm not going to be able to necessarily know your eval process if you even had one. So take it with a grain of salt that, I'm doing this based off of almost like a blind faith of knowing, okay, you're giving me this template as a fact of, okay, I feel like this is where I'm strongest, where I'm weakest, things like that. And before we even close this out, to talk about warm-ups just slightly, use that as a time, especially if you notice that, hey, I have some weaknesses in specific areas during that eval. Use this as a time to prime the body. I say that instead of doing stretching, because stretching is more say a relaxation process. If we are priming it, it's more so using the exercises that teach that muscle pattern how to fire prior to us doing it, or even to stabilize the muscles to kind of wake up if we notice that, hey, like I poor scapular retraction and isolation, which I need for my pushing movements, then I might do quick and fast, just like rapid band rows or something like that, just to warm up that area and kind of activate those muscles in a sense. So that's how we want to use our warm up. If you have any questions on that, but yeah, just wanted to give you guys this quick training. As y'all know, like that's one thing I've always stood on with the One Decision brand, is that we want to create impact over everything else, for those that can afford our services and even those that can't. We want to make sure everybody is in a position to progress. So once again, if you have any questions, please go ahead and shoot them to me. I would love to be able to answer them and help you guys out as best as I can and put you guys in the best position to see the progress that you want to see along this fitness journey. But until next time, please make sure that you guys follow me on all socials. Please make sure that you guys are keeping track of even the polls that we put up, because that does lead to more of our training programs that we'll be putting together in our free training classes that we do, such as this one. So that way we can help you guys out in the best way possible, put forward the right products for you guys, and even give you guys the right freebies that you need as well. So yeah, once again, follow me all socials, friend me if you can on Facebook, and be on the lookout for our next dates and times for training. But until then, y'all have a blessed night.